Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Many Minds Therapy Hub. Hi, Dr. Laura. Hi, Rosie.
Hello.
Yeah, so today we decided to continue to discuss trauma and more specifically, the importance of a support system or lack of support system. Yeah.
Yeah, and the impact that not having a support system can have on trauma and developing trauma symptoms.
Yeah.
So
Who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I was gonna just say, like, where do we even start with that? Because I mean, our ability to reach out can start like from the beginning of life, right? Depending on the environment that we grow up in. There might be people who are willing to like support us, but maybe we grew up in a way where we learn that we can't count on anyone, right? That I can't trust that, and so I'm not ever going to really reach out for that. So I mean, I think it's complicated, and like, where do you even start?
Yeah. It's so complex because even right now, the way you're describing this is we're talking maybe about an event that happened to us as grown-ups or teenage years or young adults, but then we have attachment trauma that may have been playing into the way we perceive, our network, our support system. And, or maybe the reality is that our current support system also says, don't reach out to me. So it is so complex.
Yeah, for sure. I think the attunement and emotional accessibility of the, attachment figures in our lives and early life shapes how we view the world and ourselves in it, and how we view how safe it is to try to lean on people. And even when you're kind of in a place where you might want more connection, a lot of the time, I think the ways that we have developed to protect ourselves, the protective parts that have kind of helped us survive having to be on our own emotionally in a lot of ways, it can be really tricky to kind of break out of that and start healing those parts enough to allow for something different.
Or even to have like the awareness that there could be something different. Like, how could I even know that that is an option if it's something that I literally never experienced in my life?
Yeah.
So maybe it seems like we want to kind of start there.
Sure.
With our early experiences and the people around us and how they seems like, right? And then we can move on to see where it takes us. But, our caregivers, system around us, neighbors, grandparents, whoever that was, what messages did they send to us? Did they say, if you have a boo-boo, come to me? Or did they say, suck it up?
Or
deal with it.
You're fine.
You're fine. There is nothing wrong with you.
Right. But clearly there is. Right.
Yeah.
So then
the denial.
Yeah. Then we learn like, well, why even bother? Right? Because you're going to dismiss what I'm feeling, and that is really painful. So why would I continue subjecting myself to that pain over and over and over again? And I can just like deal with it myself, because really that's what I'm already doing anyway.
And when you have a caregiver that is inconsistent, and maybe sometimes they are emotionally accessible and other times they're really not, then that can be really hard too, because I think we develop kind of this like shifting way of, like they call it disorganized attachment, right? The shifting way of trying to navigate connection. Sometimes I'm like, please don't go away, and I'm feeling really anxious about our connection. And sometimes I'm like, okay, well, I can't rely on you. I have to be enough on my own. And so yeah, like navigating kind of, I think even figuring out like how we've come to protect ourselves, or what kind of attachment we even have. If you're one of the lucky unicorns that has secure attachment, then you probably already know how to have, secure bonds in your adult relationships, because that was already modeled for you.
Sure. And I think that there's kind of a misconception that having a secure attachment is rare, and actually over half of the population has a secure attachment. And I'm like, well, where are these people, right? Maybe I need to like find a different circle. I don't know, but I hear that all a lot. Secure attachment, like, what are you talking about? But really there are far more people who are securely attached, or who are using secure attachment strategies, than those who are not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I don't want us to get distracted from the theme, but it's actually a really important point that you're making, because we also have earned secure attachment. So if you did not have secure attachment growing up, you can always get to a point where as an adult, you can actually develop new strategies in new relationships. So you can actually have secure attachment relationships, even if you also had a history of maybe not having someone so accessible and attuned to you who actually provided the needs that you needed and was dismissive. Maybe there is that possibility that we can get there. And it shows that we, even with a history of trauma, can get to a point of developing that secure network system that we need in our healing process, which is the whole idea, right?
Yeah. So that we get to this point where actually we feel like we can reach out, that there are people who I trust enough with like this really vulnerable part of me, and that I can hand it to them and trust that they're not going to completely smash it to pieces.
Yeah. And it takes
and then
time.
we always go ahead.
I was just going to say, it takes time to figure out or discern who are those people that are worth kind of investing that kind of vulnerability in. And it's, I think it's often like little bits at a time. Like, okay, I'll give you this. How do you handle it?
Yeah. Well, and especially with a history of attachment trauma, right? If we, like, how you mentioned, don't have a history of having those experiences, then if we maybe tiptoe into, can I actually lean on you when I am having this like trauma response? Maybe I'll start trusting you and building up to it. And that could be it. I think we also need to remember that we may have grown up with secure attachments, but something really severe may have happened that shattered our world, and then suddenly we can trust it anymore. And maybe the people that are actually accessible to us are not anymore in our mind.
Right. Yeah. Can you give an example of what that might look like?
Yes, one good example would be, since we were talking earlier about immigration, you may have had a really good experience growing up with a family of origin, let's say, but then you migrate. And immigration, people don't see it as traumatic, but there are so many things about immigration that can actually be traumatic. What if you cross the border and that was an awful experience? That is traumatic in itself. Now you don't trust your new land, and now you learn that you have to hide and you don't have anyone to lean on, or who do you reach out to when you're triggered? Do people actually get you that maybe you didn't show up to work because you are going through a severe traumatic experience and you're not just like flaky? That is a good experience. I mean, that's an example.
Yeah.
So
that you could have had like this wonderful support network, and then go to a new place, and doesn't even necessarily have to be like crossing a border. You could be moving to a new place and just not know anybody there, right? It could look a lot of different ways, but I think what you're saying is like the concept is kind of the same.
Yeah.
Yes, the concept, or a lot of I don't want to make it too triggering for people, but there are like a lot of incidents that happen to men and women that will shatter the way they see the world.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of complexity in immigration to, like what you were mentioning, Dr. Yamilka, about, if you're not a documented migrant, like having to hide and not knowing who can I really trust. Is this, and if you're like seeing a therapist, for example, like having some people can have anxiety about, can I tell you this about myself? And yeah. So just kind of finding, and side note,
if they get to a therapist.
Right, totally. And side note, like therapists are not allowed to, it's actually illegal for a therapist to report that somebody is undocumented.
Yeah.
It would be breaking confidentiality. Yeah.
But then how do you build a network, right, that actually has got your back?
Yeah.
And let's just move away from, even if we were to like move away from that, we all work, the three of us work with a lot of people that have complex trauma. And I would probably tell you, it is rare when I don't hear this. I cannot share this with my family because they won't get it. And when I share with them, they say, how long is this gonna last? Like, get over it. So do you actually have a support system?
But there are some things that I can go to them for, but there are things absolutely that I feel like I cannot.
Yeah. And if your family has kind of protective strategies where they're kind of minimizing their own suffering to try to get through it, then they don't have the capacity to hold space for you in the way that you need. And so kind of being able to discern and find the people that get you, that you can be your full true self around. I think it's chosen family, right? Can be a process.
And that's one of the really challenging things about complex PTSD is that, like, well, very often it's relational, right? So we're experiencing this repeated trauma in some kind of relational context. So then maybe I do go to therapy, right? And then what? I go right back into the same environment, and then I'm dealing with the same things, the same triggers over and over and over again, and it's really hard to heal like that. Right. And so then it goes to what you just said, Rosie, about like a chosen family, like, so, or alternate support system. Right.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it can be helpful, especially I'm thinking like if you're in a marginalized community, like you're queer, like finding community that is also queer, that gets it, right? That I think a lot of, hopefully it seems like as a culture, hopefully we're moving in the right direction, right? It seems like maybe at least some of us, but I think there are still a lot of people that experience discrimination or even get cut out of their family for coming out. So finding the people that get it, that celebrate who you are, is really important. And and sometimes it is kind of finding communities that get part of your experience, a part of your identity.
Yeah. And we can actually build resilience from that, right? That resilience and belonging to a community who has been experiencing similar challenges that we have, right? There's something to be said for lived experience. Like, I can have all of like the book knowledge and understand concepts and stuff like that, but if I haven't really actually lived something, my understanding is going to be very different than someone who has. And that doesn't mean that, we still can't help those people, or that we're not going to be effective therapists for those people.
It's a different gotten.
Say again?
It's a different gotten. I say, like,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
are actually gotten, like you get it. You don't just know it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's like a shortcut, right?
Mhm.
That, okay, this person already has like some kind of lived experience that we have in common. So I just automatically assume that, okay, they're gonna understand.
Yeah.
And you know, they may not, but that's kind of what I see. Oh, you have this thing too. So like we're simpatico, right?
Yeah. It's a place to start.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a place to start.
Yeah. And sometimes I think it's, you know, we can approach it from lots of different ways. I think therapy is often a really important piece of healing and being able to let people closer, right? It's like healing enough and building secure attachment within ourselves and maybe even to a therapist, right? Having a therapeutic relationship where we feel seen and gotten is really healing and can be a lot of the time like that first step towards kind of opening back up again and having even a sounding board to discern, like, is this person okay? I think I maybe like this community, but there's like these things. Is this, you know, like when we have complex trauma, we often will doubt our own experience. So I think it can be really grounding to have a therapeutic setting to process through, like, okay, is this fear coming up because of my own internal triggers, I'm, you know, shadows from the past or what have you, or is this actually a red flag in this relationship or this person?
Yeah. Right. And so then that takes us back to the question of, how do I build that support network? What does that even look like? I mean, I think that just the things that we've talked about so far demonstrates it's not necessarily simple, right? There are so many different factors that influence how we show up in the world, how we interact with each other and the world around us, and our experiences, how it affects our ability to like reach out, or how we even perceive the world around us.
Yeah.
Complicated.
It's hard because it is hard because sometimes we may feel disappointed and go right back into, oh, see, I knew it. Can't trust anyone. So it's like learning, how do you continue to like sort through it? How do I sort through it until I find, you know, what it is that I need to continue my healing journey? It's hard.
Yeah. And I think sometimes too, we can kind of go to the opposite extreme where when you have, or similar extreme, right? When you have complex trauma where we, first sign of danger in a relationship, first sign of any kind of trouble, we can want to cut and run because maybe that's a protective strategy that has worked for you in some ways. But I think oftentimes, you know, just because a relationship has a rupture doesn't mean, I mean, all relationships have tension, right? And being able to repair and work through that strengthens the relationship. Or maybe not all, a lot of relationships. So it's normal to have tension or funkiness, right? in friendships.
Yeah. And the other side of the pool, I guess, would be clinging onto not so helpful resources.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, how do we work through and try to balance things out so that, you know, I think you gave Rosie a really good example, is that if I'm in doubt, let me sort through this with someone who may actually be more neutral and can actually help me see through what may potentially be happening, because it could be difficult.
Yeah. And being able to show up for yourself and what might be coming up for you, or the protective parts that might be triggered, often is like, I think needs, or it's really helpful to do that concurrently, because then we're able to kind of lovingly heal these little parentified parts of ourselves that might have started in childhood, that, you know, might be protecting us in ways that also get in the way of the kind of connection that we're longing for.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what,
So
just
what would
pop,
be the summary, Dr. Laura?
oh my gosh. Well, that's not where I was going.
Oh, go ahead. I'm like, did we answer your question?
Yeah,
Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
kind of partly, I guess. So no, what I what I was just thinking of was, you know, during my time in the military, going to so many different places, and we're all starting over, and it's just not the service members, right, who are going, who are traveling. Oftentimes, like, we have families, and we take them with us.
Yeah.
Well, when we're in the military, when we're the service member, we have like the command that we're going to, and we automatically kind of have these resources like built in, and whether we choose to use them or not, you know, is
Mm-hmm.
whatever. But families don't necessarily have that same benefit, right? And so I see
Yeah.
kids especially struggle with this, right? Like you're the new kid in a school over and over and over,
Yeah.
again, and that can be something that's really challenging. And I'm not sure why that came up, but it just did. So I was like, oh, this kind of fits. So let me just throw it out there.
No, I think it fits. You know, it's like you were saying before, it's not like it's a different type of migration, but it's over and over. So it's multiple times having to try and build a resource, but it's not just that. You're exposed to, in a way, a traumatic experience over and over multiple times.
Right. And then it's like, well, don't actually get too comfortable because we're going to pick up and leave again. Right. So then
So
how do we
why
build
settle?
that permanence, right? How do I establish those long lasting um, relationships of people who I feel like I can count on? It's tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough.
Yeah. And especially if a kiddo doesn't kind of naturally struggles with social like connection, that can be really especially hard, right? Like if you just don't naturally make friends super easily, or you're shy or whatever, I think that can be really hard. It can be traumatic for sure.
So I
I
wonder
mean, the
if
attachment, detachment, kind of like moving away from like friends, and then also think about the parents too. You know, can the kids lean on the parents while they migrate from one town to the other, or can they not? Then we have zero resources.
Yeah. And I wonder if it might be helpful to maybe like throw out some ideas about like maybe where people can find some connection. I don't
Yeah.
know. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think I was starting to kind of touch on that, right? Like finding people or groups with similar interests or similar struggles, right? Whether that's a support group, or, you know, if you're religious, like your religious community, or if you're, you know, if you're really passionate about music, kind of finding like musical community or whatever. Like I think a lot of the time that can be like a good kind of starting place.
Yeah.
People with like,
I mean, I'll share
like
personally
ways.
you know, when I moved this last time, it was really tough. The only thing that really grounded us was going to our interest community. Like I love dance, so I like a few months into it, I was like, okay, let me research and I'll join a team so that I can actually ground myself and connect and build relationships, because it's a whole new town, no people. And how do you know, and the same, you know, for the rest of us, like where can we fit? Because we know there are areas that we don't fit. And that's really hard. So while we struggle building this because we don't necessarily fit, let's find a place where we fit. And that in itself is helpful, because you can connect even if the relationships initially are not deep. You know, you're still engaging in something and connecting and trying to slowly build that community.
Right. And you have like the safety net of the shared interest.
Right.
That I
Yeah.
don't necessarily need to know anything about you other than, hey, you like this thing that I
This
like,
is, and we do too.
right? And like if you look at kids on the playground, like they do the same
They
thing,
want to go on the
right?
slide. They all like the
Yeah.
same thing, or that swing. They take
Right,
turns, and that's how they start.
right, right.
Or they're bonding over this music or this video game or whatever, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think for me too, it has also depended on the time, like kind of the phase of my life, right? So when my kids were really little, I needed to have mom friends that had kids around the same age because it was a big adjustment, kind of figuring out, finding my bearings as a parent, and having other parents that were kind of in the same struggle of like navigating life around a toddler's needs and schedule and nap and all the things. And
they get you.
Yeah.
That last minute cancellation because your kiddo is, I don't know, fill in the blank. It could be literally anything, right? Like another parent is going to be like, oh yeah, I feel you. I get it. Like, don't worry about it.
Don't stress.
Yeah. Another time. We'll do it another time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And sometimes too, I think, just like being gentle with yourself, there might be less time and space or ease and kind of making those, like making the physical time and space for that. And so sometimes that's like, I'm more of my social connection might be over the phone or over Zoom or whatever. Like, yeah. So
Yeah.
it kind of changes through the lifespan depending on what your resources are and what your needs are.
And also people that really struggle even trying to find a way to connect with people around a shared interest. And that's a really hard one. So that kindness towards, self is really important, because now you really have to rely on your own resources, and as hard as it is sometimes, that's the place where you actually reach out to, maybe you belong to a church, or maybe not, maybe you reach out to a therapist, like where do you start? So you can find somewhere to process and feel seen, or at least heard, or validated.
Yeah. Anything you would add, Laura? Dr. Laura?
I don't know. I feel like we kind of gave a pretty well-rounded, it was a well-rounded discussion, and we brought in a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different angles, and like this could be a never-ending story, right? This could be like a never-ending discussion, because like we're human and humans are complex, and we're in this constant state of change and evolving, and like all of these things, and like, well, we kind of got to put a time limit on how much that we can really discuss at one time, because I know like we all have clients, and
Yeah.
In life,
people don't want to
also
listen to me talk for like 2 hours.
right? I think this is our max.
Right.
This is the longest we've spoken. I'm tracking on my time here.
I mean, I think one thing I would add is I often will just ask people questions about themselves. And I think that that's like, one, people love to talk about themselves. And I think that makes people feel like you care and like you're interested, right? And it also gives me more kind of insight into like, is this somebody that I vibe with? Is this somebody that feels like they fit kind of the type of person that I am striving to be, or the type of connection and community I'm longing for?
Oh yeah.
I like
values. I throw out very strong, like I have very strong values, right? Of what is valuable to me. Other people may not agree with that, but these are the things that are really important to me and non-negotiable. So I will bring up, I don't know, for example, like queer rights, because that's really important to me. And if you can't be on board with that, then you're not my person,
Not it.
right? Like this is not a good fit. This is not going to work. We're just going to be wasting our time. And so I think also values-based conversations can be really helpful too.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really good point. Helps you kind of sort out
Quickly.
Yeah.
Or quicker, not quickly, but quicker than, you know, just going for coffee and talking about the birds.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, this was really good. And because I'm the time tracker.
Thank you for holding us accountable.
Yes, I have to keep us on time. Thank you, everyone. Thank you both so much. Yeah, and thanks for all the tips for everybody out there. Hopefully something clicks and something helps someone. And yeah, until next time.
Bye.
Bye.